Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. This podcast exists because I wanted my young patrol officers to hear the wisdom and encouragement of older, wiser officers I was learning from. But that information wasn't getting to them most of the time. So I created this podcast in order for them to get life-saving and career-changing support. On this podcast, you'll hear from detectives and dispatchers, U.S. Marshals and county sheriffs, and the occasional Army MP. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you don't have to do everything the hard way. This is part 2 of an interview with Shawn Thomas. If you haven't listened to part 1, in which she talked about her experience as a wellness officer in a large sheriff's office in the Pacific Northwest, then please go download that episode. She had a lot of insight to share, especially if you think you might be the first wellness officer in your agency. But today we're talking about her second chapter. She began producing wellness conferences with speakers and vendors and hundreds of first responder attendees. And this unexpected role became her main gig when she retired. This whole process of putting together a conference is fascinating, but I think the main thing I want you to walk away with is that you are capable of doing things you never thought you'd do. There may not be a clear path forward, but don't let that stop you from making a difference. Here's Shawn Thomas of First Responder Conferences. Talk to me about starting up these conferences. It seems to me that the person who asked you to, hey, put on a conference, that's a big ask. Maybe they didn't realize that if that was a big ask.
Well, maybe I think that's why they do it, because they realize they don't want to do it themselves.
No idea what this entails. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't, right? It was supposed to be a one and done, and here we are. We just finished our 48th conference, so it's a huge learning curve. I had no idea what I was going to get myself into, but I have some great, passionate people behind me, helping, organize and put these conferences on, and then the local boots on the ground folks. It really takes those people that are passionate about it as well to move something forward. As having a conference is pretty big.
Where are you drawing those people from?
So I have a couple gals in Idaho that help. One, her husband's active duty police officer in Idaho. Okay. And the other gal, she is a nurse in Idaho. So they know how important it is. And then when you see the testimonials and you hear the feedback and people telling us that, this conference saved my life, how do you not continue to move forward?
How much time between the first conference and the second one?
The second conference was in Florida. It was with one of our speakers from the first conference. And they said, this is great. Let's go to Florida. And so then we tried to have it in Florida. And then we had some connections that were like, let's go to North Carolina. So then we went to North Carolina. That's when I found out it was a lot easier to do it at home because I knew the connections. I knew who to push information out to when we were in a different state and we really didn't have any local people helping. It made it a lot more difficult. So that's when I quickly realized, okay, if we're going to do these conferences, it's a lot of work. It costs quite a bit of money to put one of these on. So
what percentage of your conferences have been in the Pacific Northwest in your home territory?
Quite a few have been here just because it was easier for me to do them. And then again, at every conference, we get people that are like, hey, this was great. Can you come here? Like I just got a phone call today. We were in California and they said, we really want to have a conference in the Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia area. And I was like, okay, great. So it just, we don't ever go looking for conferences. It's just at every conference, we tend to get people reaching out to us saying, hey, we want to have a conference. So when we were in Ocean City, Maryland, somebody came to me and said, hey, we're in Delaware and we want to have a conference in Delaware.
Even though doing it away from home is harder because you don't have local volunteers, you've done the majority of your conferences away from home.
Yes. But we do. So we have people there that when we say, okay, great, you want to have a conference, these are the things that you need to help with. Because without them, there's no way that we could make it work. And so at every conference, we have a co-host and endorsing agencies, and those people help and make sure that the conference is beneficial and check the boxes of all the things that we need to get done.
Is it easier to get into like a conference room at an agency or a ballroom at a hotel or a church, or where do you end up landing?
There's pros and cons to a hotel, but I would say that's our preferred venue just because it's a one-stop shop. Probably the most difficult part is finding that venue that fits our needs because our conferences are in one big ballroom. So the attendees sit at rounds. And that's where we have breakfast and lunch together. And then we have a networking social after day one. And the whole idea of the rounds is to get people to start networking and communicating with other people, to find out what their departments are doing, to maybe bring that information back, to create some type of program. Or, if something's not working right, maybe they can change it up. And the only way to do that is to learn from other people. So we really encourage the networking over the 2 days, and everybody is just all together. There's no breakout sessions. Everybody listens to the same presentations. So we're kind of unique in that way because there's a lot of conferences that will do breakout sessions and then you have to pick. But I try to balance out the schedule to make sure that no matter who's speaking, everyone in attendance can benefit from their presentation.
So your website is what? How do they find you?
It's www.1, so like the number 1, and then S as in Sam, T as in Tom, R as in Robert, C as in Charles.org. So 1strc.org.
Firstrc.org. That's awesome. Yep. So would you go out of the country?
Yeah. Super. Actually, this last conference we were at last week in California, we had a gal from England that was there. And she was like, this is the best thing ever. And I'm going to bring back this information. I'd really like to see something. So, and there's a couple of people that have come up to us and said, hey, what do you think about Europe? Or what do you think about? So we definitely would love to go other places. And then even Canada is so close that it would be great to do something in another country. It's just, and Canada probably would be cheaper since it's closer, but it's one of those things where nobody is giving us all this money to have these conferences between our registration and our resource partners / sponsors. That's how we pay for everything. Mm-hmm. So at every conference, it's kind of really starting all over again. And nobody's like, here's $50,000, have this conference. So we really have to work hard to make sure that we cover all costs. So it would be interesting to figure out, okay, how are we going to cover those costs? Because obviously that's a little bit more. We probably would have to get some type of funding for it.
To fly to Europe? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm sure if you raise the rates of the registrations sky high, you could have almost anything you want. You could have any speaker, you could have any service, you could have any food, you could have any venue.
Right.
What's the hardest choice you've had to make?
We know that there's these agencies that aren't making mental health and wellness a priority. We really want to try to get them on board. And we know that training budgets are tight. So we're trying to keep the registration cost at something that the department will pay for their first responders. And then if not, then hopefully the first responder can pay out of pocket. And if they financially have a hardship, then we have a scholarship fund for them.
Okay. What percentage of your attendees are paid for by their agency?
I would say a majority of them. I think most of them are, but I know throughout my career that I paid for a lot of my own training. Like if there's things that I'm interested in and the department said, well, we can't pay for it, but if you want to go on your own, we'll give you, we'll pay you while you're gone on training and you can pay your own way. And I did that several times. I even paid for my own training as well. So it just really depends on how important it is to you. downside is I think that most people are like, oh, well, why would I want to pay for self-care or learn more about self-care, which, they should. And the departments really should pay for it, right? If we have unhealthy first responders, then they're not coming to work, or they're maybe, they have lack of sleep, or they're falling asleep on the job, or they're getting in trouble, or we really need to take care of them. We really need to focus on their wellness. And I would hope that a department would try to send their people to a wellness conference at least once a year.
So tell me, what conferences do you have coming up later in the year, and what are each of those like?
Well, we're super excited because in September, we're going to have our 50th conference. And so we're making a big deal out of it. Everybody's getting special T-shirts. It's going to be really cool. And it's in Washington, where I started. And then in October, we're headed to Houston. In November, we're headed to Sacramento. December, we're still trying to work on a venue possibly in Florida, but we haven't figured that out yet. And then January of 25, we'll be in Arizona. February, we have our yearly conference in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. March, we will be in Ocean City, Maryland again. And April, we're headed back to California in the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Ventura type area.
Okay.
And then we're working on more conferences after that.
And a lot of these conferences have different speakers. So if you attend one, you could go to another, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing that we try to do with our conferences, is we try to use local speakers just because they connect with the audience. And they also know the culture and the climate in that area. When I balance out the schedule, I try to include national speakers as well. So if I draw from our national speakers that will fit what we don't have locally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, so because I try to balance it out and have like 8 to 10 speakers at each conference. The other thing is anyone's invited to attend. So at our conferences, we have law enforcement, fire, dispatch, corrections. We encourage family members to register as well. We have therapists that attend.
You have chaplains?
Yes, chaplains. We have chaplains that attend. Anyone is welcome. Like I said, we focus on first responders, but at the end of the day, I try to do a really good job of making sure that the schedule includes overall wellness. So no matter who's speaking, you can benefit from their presentation. So, really, these conferences are not possible without my team. They're both from Idaho. Amanda Brumbaugh, she's my assistant director, and Nicole Stevenson is my executive assistant. So without them, there's no way I could do this. And I just love them to death and just think that they are here helping me through this uncharted journey.
Yeah. You never thought you'd be doing this at this stage, right? Yeah.
No, one and done. That's what it is. That's what it was supposed to be. I encourage people throughout their career to, number one, train as much as possible in different types of skills. I think you and I had discussed this before, that a lot of first responders get into this profession and think, well, maybe I should quit, but there's nothing else that I know how to do. And so then they stay in it longer than they should because they think that there's nothing else out there for them. And I think it's really important, like I said, to keep your doors open and learn different skills throughout your career. And I mean, because, look at me, I'm retired and now I'm doing conferences. No one ever taught me how to do conferences. And this was not ever like a dream or anything. It was just happened. And I know it's helping. And so however I can continue to help.
There's ways to communicate to you through your website. If somebody wants to help what you're doing, they can contact you through your website and fill out a form. And
we have we have a speaker form. So if people think that they have a presentation that would be a good fit, please fill out the speaker form. We have a volunteer form. So if you're wanting to help us with these conferences, please fill out the volunteer form.
Well, if you ever come to Kansas City, I'd be glad to volunteer and help out. I'm a specialist at like stacking chairs and things like that. So.
Oh, great. Yeah, we need chair stackers for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And if people are interested in co-hosting a conference in their area, please contact us too. We'd love to have that conversation, especially if you live in Hawaii. We really want you to come to Hawaii.
That's awesome.
When we first started, I was like, oh, okay, well, what do we call this conference? So it is presented by First Responder Conferences. And the title of the conference is First Responder Mental Health and Wellness.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I just want to make sure that people are aware of, that these conferences, I'll get a lot of people that say, okay, well, we'll send our peer support team. I think it's great that they send their peer support team, but I think it's bigger than that. These conferences we are trying to educate on wellness and to provide tools and confidential resources. So to get our first responders through these difficult professions. So I encourage people to attend outside of peer support. I encourage people, boots on the ground and all the way up to command staff, to attend these conferences. I mean, every conference is a little bit different because we have different speakers, but some of the main things that we try to cover is finances, because those are crucial, right? If you're not financially stable, then you're stressed out, which is stressing you out. So, and then some conferences we have like communication pieces or marriage or relationship type of presentations. We have personal stories with post-traumatic growth, so people get rid of the stigma and realize that they're not alone. Some conferences we talk about tools, which could be like yoga or meditation. Some conferences we talk about sleep. Some conferences we talk about therapy or the different therapy modalities, neuroscience. It's just, every conference, like I said, is a little bit different. But I try to balance out the schedule with different topics, with different professions.
Do you have any topics that you just are not going to cover? They're too controversial, they're too under investigated, like they're just too new or anything? Is there just anything that's completely off topic or completely out of bounds for you?
I haven't really run into anything like that. I mean, it's a pretty open conference. I mean, it can be heavy. We talk about a lot of different things.
Well, I just know that when it comes to wellness, and not even first responder wellness, but just wellness for people in general, everybody wants to find the silver bullet, the cure-all that will fix everything. And there's how many billions of dollars do we all spend, because the latest fad, the latest cure-all, this is going to fix everything. And there are some useful tools that are really pretty new. There's different types of therapy and medications and other things that are going to get fleshed out and better understood in the coming years, and they'll be useful tools. But at the same time, I can imagine it's difficult. I should just ask you: do you have a way to filter out the people who say, "Hey, I'd like to come speak at your conference about whatever they may want to speak about"? Do you have a way to filter out like who you would include or who you wouldn't?
When I receive the speaker information, I schedule a phone call with them, and then I kind of talk about that. So for instance, this is a good example. Today, I spoke to somebody who talks about divorce, and I was looking at the high rate of divorce in first responders.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, yeah, that's true. And I mean, divorce is for a lot of high stress jobs. And there were things that she told me that I had no idea about, but I thought to myself, okay, why would I bring this person in to talk about divorce? Not everybody's divorced. Not everybody's going through divorce. Not everybody has been through a divorce. So it was just like, what would they have to add? Well, the more we actually talked for an hour, and I said, hey, I know this is what you're talking about, but is there any way we can flex and adjust your presentation to talk about different things? Like, hey, we're not saying that, hey, if you're going to get a divorce, then here's the information, because that's not everybody in the room may not find that beneficial at that time, which I hope not. But I said, how can we incorporate different things into this presentation? Like, number one, being proactive and understanding that maybe it's not, we can't always be proactive. And so if you're in that stage, then these are things that we can help with. But she also brought up that it's not just that person, right? And that's what I think that's important about these conferences is we're not just talking about you. You could be perfectly healthy, but you also work with people and you live with people, and I mean, you have friends, you have family. So how can we help other people? So that presentation might not relate to the person in the room, but maybe it could help that peer, help that coworker. And learning different things. And, God forbid, if somebody was going through a divorce or needed help, how can we help assist them? Or how can we identify maybe things aren't going so well, and how can we try to be proactive and help them? And if we can't be proactive, but they still need some type of information or assistance that, hey, I know of this business or whatever that could help you through this difficult time. So at first, when we went into the conversation, I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Why would I bring this in? But the more I talked to her, and the more she was being willing to be flexible, and I thought, okay, well, this is good. This is good information that I think that we can adjust to make it beneficial for whomever is in attendance.
That's great. It's funny to me that you have multiple times mentioned something 6 or 8 years ago as if it were ancient history. You think that things have changed that much in the last 5 to 10 years?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, because like when we first in 2016, when we had our first conference, it was just like, what is this? Right. And then over time, people just kept on picking it up a little bit. I think we're way ahead of the game on the West Coast. The East Coast is a little bit more of a struggle. And I guess in certain areas, right? Because I know Kansas is doing quite a bit of good there.
Yeah.
But there's places like, let's take Oregon, for instance, right? So we've had multiple conferences in Washington, Idaho, but we've never been to Oregon.
Yeah. Been to California.
We've been to California, but never been to Oregon. And Oregon, I mean, they had so many issues in Portland. It's, and I know that there's people in that state that are being proactive and that are trying to help. Personally, I know people that are doing some great work there, but I never hear of any conferences in Oregon. We've been to Utah. We finally made it to Utah. We haven't been to Montana. So people from Montana come to our Idaho conference. We have a conference in Ocean City, Maryland every year, and it is a pretty big conference. And so people come from all over to go to Ocean City to come to this conference. And you would think, why would people be in Ocean City? But you have a great group of people that are trying to lead the way and be proactive in first responder mental health and wellness. And so that's where we usually end up, is in places like in San Luis Obispo. That's a tri-county thing. That's Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura all getting together saying, hey, we're this community that needs to help one another and be proactive and do whatever we can. They're fantastic, but you just have some areas that are just like nothing.
What's the largest conference you've had, like number of attendees?
So that is the Spokane Police Department. They're pretty active in wellness, and they've hosted, I think we just had our 6th conference this year. That's our biggest conference. We do it in Spokane/Coeur d'Alene. So it's, we've had it in Spokane a couple of years, and we've had it in Coeur d'Alene a couple of years. And we do that conference every year. And so historically, that's our biggest conference, with Ocean City being our second, and now San Luis Obispo being our third.
What's the smallest conference you've ever done?
Well, when we first started, I think that was probably, because they just hadn't gained momentum or anything, but maybe 100 is probably our smallest.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I would like to see, Yes, it's great, right? It's great for the 100 people. It's cost effective, not so much when you only have, that many people there. It just, because it costs a lot of money to put conferences on.
In your mind, do you have a cap? I mean, obviously a certain number pushes you out of your venue probably, but you can always change venues. Do you have like a figure in your head, like I would never go above this number?
Well, since we have it in one big ballroom, and then, we have the attendees sit at rounds, and then we have resource partners /sponsors that purchase tables, and they sit on the outer perimeter. So I would say that, on average, our conference is around 7,000 to 10,000 square footage is what we need. I mean, I guess at some of those larger venues, maybe we could get 400, but that probably would be about it. Okay. Quite honestly, I do like the smaller, like, the around the 200 mark. Not that I don't like those bigger conferences, but I think as far as networking goes, it's easy to network with 200 people.
Yeah.
Or 250 people.
2,000, you just get lost.
No. Yeah. I mean, we've been to conferences that are that big. And, I remember going to a conference and somebody said, oh, yeah, we just got back from the whatever. And I'm like, oh, we were there too. Like, not seeing people just because there's so many people there. I'm not saying that it's not beneficial for the people that attend, but as far as networking goes, it's harder to network with the people there if you don't run into people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me hear your best elevator pitch for why someone should come to a first responder conference.
Well, I mean, we really are trying to be proactive, not just for the first responder, but also for their coworkers. So I would say that we really need, as a society or as a community or first responder community, we need to work on our wellness and self-care, like I said. So I think it's important for you to learn about that, not just for yourself, but for your coworkers, for your family members, because we include all of that. Wellness, at the end of the day, wellness is wellness. And then also to provide confidential resources and tools for them and for everyone else as well, because we all have coworkers that we work with and that need some type of assistance. And so maybe they're perfectly healthy, which I don't think anybody is, but it's always a good thing to improve on your own health, but also to help those people that may be struggling, that need some type of assistance that you just weren't aware of.
Excellent. Shawn, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Ginger Passarelli, who couldn't stop saying nice things about Shawn Thomas and her husband, and the work that Shawn has done to help officer wellness across the country. Most of you know that my day job is working in a church, which means one of my responsibilities is doing marriage counseling and premarital counseling, before the wedding. One of the things that I recommend even to healthy and happy couples is to go to a marriage conference. That often gets me a strange look and a, why? Well, we're not having problems right now. Well, my answer is that marriage conferences and wellness conferences work great for people in critical condition, but they work even better as preventative medicine. So be proactive and go to a conference. There are links to Shawn's website in the episode notes. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain. Your son came into our department.
Yes, my son came in, probably going to get this wrong on when he came on. I think it was 2012, I believe.
So he also overlapped you?
Yes.
By a few years?
He overlapped me by a few years. I overlapped my dad, yes. It's one of those kinds of things in which I never really thought too much about it, but yeah, it was an interesting play and how that happened. It's like with my dad, I think it was a good thing. It was a good thing and a bad thing, but overall, I think it was a good experience for me. Now, my son, obviously, I don't know, he's still in his career.
Yeah, he's a sergeant now.
And he's a sergeant now, and he's been on about 12 years, I think, now, going on 13 years. And so obviously very proud of him. I know his grandpa would be very proud of him, too.
So there has been an officer steal at KCK since 1961.
Yes.
So 60-something years now.
60 plus
63,
years
yeah.
of continuous police community service, yes.
Yeah. This show is free for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please make a $5 donation by following the link in the episode description. You don't have to do that. You already get the show for free. But thank you for teaming up with me on this mission. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city. That's great. Do you mind if I keep you for just a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. You do mind?
Yeah, I do mind. I got to go now.